Hello, everyone. So my name is Corey, for those who don't know. I'm part of the GigWorks community team, and we are here today with Lili Foggle with Impressive Interviewing. She's going to be giving tips, tricks, going through how to present yourself in an interview. So this is not technical interview skills. This is all behavioral. And I will hand it over to Lili. Oh, if you have questions, put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. You can chat amongst yourselves in the chat section. Will be about 90 minutes, which will be a little bit longer than typical webinars we have. The last 5 to 15 minutes, depending when Lili rounds up, will be questions and answers. So any questions and answers you can put in the QA section. And I'll be monitoring the chat for anything during the actual webinar. So have fun. Lili, it's all over to you now.
Thanks so much, Corey. I really have to thank Corey Whitcraft. She has been working tirelessly since February to bring you guys this training. So Corey, thank you so much for all of your efforts. And I also really want to recognize the incredible Topcoder team. I am so impressed with how passionate they are about the success of their members. They are so committed to your success that they tracked me down and hired me to bring you this 90-minute training on interview skills. So I'm excited to be here. Corey is going to be monitoring the chat. If you have questions for me, however, please do put them in the Q&A, and I will get to as many of them as I can at the end of today's session. Again, it is a 90-minute webinar, so hopefully we will have plenty of time for all of your questions. I want to thank all of you for joining us here today from all over. From my company is Impressive Interviewing. I am going to go ahead and put up my PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. I want to thank you for joining me, for taking time out of your day or evening or middle of the night, as the case may be, to join me here today. My company is Impressive Interviewing. I am Lili Foggle. I am a certified behavioral interview specialist. And I'm really thrilled to be here today to share with you some of the strategies that you can use during your Topcoder gig interviews to nail the interview and get the gig. Okay, so I want to thank those of you that took the time to fill out the 2 online surveys that I posted. I posted one about 6 weeks ago, and about 35 of you filled that out. And then there was one for today's webinar that some of you filled out, and you gave me really good information. You told me what questions you're being asked in the gig interviews you've been on, and that's really good information for me to know. But more importantly, you told me the questions that you found the most challenging. You told me how I could be useful to you today. So I have really tried to gear and tailor this webinar to answer your questions, to give you the information that will be most helpful to you. So before we talk about strategies, let's talk about what are the questions you told me that you find the most challenging in your gig interviews. So the first one was questions about weakness. Questions like, what is your biggest weakness? Tell me 3 weaknesses. What do you think your weaknesses are? Questions about mistakes and failures, like, tell me about a mistake you've made. Tell me about a time you failed. And you told me that you'd really love some strategies for all those questions that ask for specific examples about other skills and abilities that aren't technical. Questions like, tell me about a time you overcame a challenge. Tell me about a time you had to lead a team. Tell me about your favorite project. You asked me if I could share with you strategies to help you give those examples in a concise and powerful way. So we're going to do all of this today. You're going to learn what a behavioral interview is, why interviewers ask those behavioral interview questions, and what are some of the behavioral interview questions you can expect to be asked in a Topcoder gig, and how to prepare to answer those questions really powerfully and concisely. So these are the strategies I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how to answer, tell me about a mistake you made. I'm going to give you a strategy for tell me about a time you failed. What is your biggest weakness? Tell me about a time you received negative feedback. Tell me about a time you had conflict with a team member. I know those of you who've been in interviews have gotten that question. I'm going to give you a strategy that you can use for any question that starts, tell me about a time you exhibited some skill or ability. And of course, we'll talk about the big one, which is tell me about yourself. But before we talk about those strategies, I have a question for you. And it's a question that I always ask whenever I do groups. And I'd like you to take a moment, just a second, and put your answer to the question I'm about to ask in the chat. It can be just one word or two words, but the question is, what do you think makes someone good at interviewing? What do you think makes someone good at interviewing? So if you could just take a moment and put that in the chat. And Corey, I can't see the chat from this sharing screen. So if you could just kind of tell me what some of the common answers you're seeing are. Oh, wait, maybe I can see the chat.
You have aptitude, honesty, confidence.
Confidence, yeah. Confidence.
Attitude towards a job.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence.
Yes, confidence. That's a big one.
Experience.
Uh-huh.
Cultural fit. Being
Oh,
prepared.
yeah.
Being well prepared. Preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence.
Confidence. Mm-hmm. So confidence is the big one. And if you see any others, Corey, go ahead and let me know. Confidence is the big one. And of course, what makes someone confident? You're confident if you're prepared. If you feel like you know what you are supposed to be doing in that interview and you're prepared to do it, which is one of the things hopefully you're going to get out of today. Here are some of the other answers that I commonly get in addition to confidence. I have a lot of people tell me that they think to be good at interviewing, you have to kind of have this natural charm or be really high energy, or you have to be someone who's really good at that small talk, you know, that little conversation that happens at the beginning before the actual interview starts, or that you need to be a natural people person. So I want to tell you that all those things are fine. They don't hurt, but they don't make someone good at interviewing. I have a lot of my clients, I work one-on-one with a lot of people, and I have a lot of clients tell me that they would be good at interviewing if only they weren't so nervous. That the thing that makes them bad at interviewing is that they get too nervous, and that if they could just be more relaxed, they'd be good at interviewing. And I want to say something to those of you who think that being nervous is a problem in interviewing, that it's holding you back. You should be nervous. You are supposed to be nervous in an interview. Your interviewers expect you to be nervous. And in fact, if you're too relaxed, if you're very clearly not nervous, that may send a message to your interviewers that you kind of don't care whether or not you get the gig. So if you're the kind of person who gets nervous in an interview, it's okay. Don't think that that gets in the way of you giving an excellent interview performance, because it doesn't. And then, of course, I have a lot of my clients, especially those clients for whom English is not their native language. They tell me that they think they'd be better at interviewing if only they didn't stumble over their words, right? That what makes them bad at interviewing is that sometimes they have to search for the right word, or they say too much. Well, I have news for you guys. None of these things are actually what makes someone good at interviewing. You can stumble over your words, you can be nervous, you cannot be a people person, you cannot be great at small talk, and you can still be great at interviewing, because interviewing is a skill. And like any skill, like playing an instrument, like playing a sport, like driving a car, interviewing is a skill that requires practice. You would never think that you could watch a 90-minute webinar on how to play the guitar and that you could then pick up a guitar and start playing, right? You wouldn't think that you could read a book on how to play tennis or how to play a sport and think that when you were finished reading that book, you can now play competitively. And you'd never expect that you could Google how to drive a car, and after reading what you found online, think that you can get behind the wheel of a car and drive safely. We accept that with these skills, It requires not just knowledge, but preparation and practice. And interviewing is the same way. What it takes to be good at interviewing is preparation and practice. And what I'm going to show you today is what you need to do to prepare. And I'm going to give you some skills that you can practice so that even if you're nervous, even if you don't always speak perfectly, you stumble over your words, you can still be great at interviewing. You can still nail it and get the gig. So gig interviews are about three things. They're about your technical skills, absolutely. They're about the behavioral skills, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by behavioral skills and how they're different from the technical skills. But gig interviews are also about deal breakers, right? I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean by that. But one of the things that's happening in your interview is your interviewers are looking to make sure that you don't have any of the qualities they consider deal breakers, any of the qualities that for them would immediately cause them to not hire you. And I'm going to tell you what those deal breakers are. But let's start with the technical questions. Okay, so I know that Topcoder members spend a lot of time preparing to answer the technical questions and solve the problems that you're going to get in your gig interviews. I know this from the surveys that you filled out for me and from the Topcoder members that I spoke to prior to this webinar. As a matter of fact, 86% of you spend at least half an hour preparing to answer and practicing to answer those technical questions and solve those problems. And of the people who filled out the survey for the webinar today, 60% of you spend more than 4 hours preparing to answer those technical questions. So you know how to do that. But the question is, how do you demonstrate those other skills and abilities? I also know from the survey that you filled out that 60% of you who filled out the survey for the webinar today told me that you've interviewed for a gig that you haven't gotten with Topcoder. 60% of you told me that you failed at interviews. So I want to let you know the feedback that Topcoder has gotten from the clients that are interviewing you. The feedback that Topcoder got is that their members are really good with the technical problems and the technical skills. They are prepared to solve the problems and answer the questions, but what they're not doing is they're not demonstrating those other skills and abilities, right? So, for example, let's talk about the difference between a technical interview and a behavioral interview so you understand what I mean. The technical questions that you get are there to assess your technical skills. They ask you to solve a problem, and the way you solve it predicts your skill level. The behavioral questions are there to assess those kind of non-technical behavioral skills and abilities. They're going to ask for examples of your past behavior. It's going to be, tell me about a time you used one of these skills or abilities, and they're using that story to predict what your future behavior might be. And I know that Topcoder members really don't prepare very much for the behavioral questions. I know this from the surveys that you filled out for me. 25% of you don't prepare at all for these questions. And I also know that Topcoder members' confidence is different when it comes to the technical questions and the behavioral questions. When I asked Topcoder members to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 what their confidence level was with answering technical questions, 100% of you gave me answers between 8 and 10. When I asked the same Topcoder members, what's your level of confidence with answering behavioral questions, 60% of you gave me an answer of 7 or less. So I know that this is the thing that's been holding you back from nailing those gig interviews. And let's talk about exactly what those behavioral interview abilities are. There are 12 of them. There are 12 skills or abilities that your interviewers want that you need to be able to demonstrate. They are a willingness to learn, right? They want to know that you're not stuck in one way of doing things. They want to know that you can take feedback well, that you can implement the feedback, that you won't get defensive if you're given feedback. They want to know that you've got good verbal communication skills, that you have the ability to explain things, that you speak clearly and concisely, you can make yourself understood. They want to know that you can listen well, because listening is a verbal communication skill as well. And they want to know that you have the ability to persuade other people, to present a vision. They want to know that you've got the teamwork and collaboration skills to be successful in the job they're hiring you for, that you can work with other people under challenging circumstances, that you're a supportive team member. You'll go the extra mile to support somebody on your team. They want to know you're friendly, easy to work with, have a positive attitude. They also want to know that you can work successfully on diverse teams, that you can work with people who are from another culture, who are from another company, or just from another function in the organization, right? They want to know that you've got conflict resolution skills, that you know how to resolve conflict without disrupting the work of the team, and that you know how to disagree in a respectful way. They want to know that you embrace challenge, that you don't give up in the face of obstacles. You're persistent, and that you can be successful even in a challenging, demanding environment. They want to know that you're flexible, adaptable, that you can change course, that if there's changing parameters of the project, changing data, changing deadlines, you can adapt. They want to know that you've got good time management skills, that you can manage multiple priorities at once, that you meet your deadlines. They want to know that you can work independently, that you can follow directions without a lot of supervision, and that you take the initiative to do what needs to be done without being told. For those of you who are interviewing for gigs in a client-facing position, they want to know that you know how to handle clients, that you know how to talk to clients, that you can communicate with clients, that you can manage a client's expectation, and that you know how to keep a client happy. Some of you are interviewing for gigs in a leadership or project management position. They want to know that you know how to set and enforce a high standard for your team, that you know how to build a positive team culture, that you support the growth of your members on your team, that you mentor them. And finally, the big one across the board, they all want to know that you have integrity, right? That you're honest, that you have a strong work ethic, that you're committed to quality and to excellence in the work that you do, that you're reliable, that you're dependable, and that if you say you're going to get something done, it gets done when you say it's going to get done. So these are the 12 things that your interviewers are looking for that are not technical skills and abilities. So we talked about how gig interviews are about 3 things, right? We talked about the technical skills. Topcoder members do a great job preparing to answer the technical questions. We talked a little bit about what behavioral skills they're looking for, and we're going to go back in a few, and I'm going to give you some strategies for demonstrating those behavioral skills. But before I do that, I want to talk about those deal breakers I told you about, right? So there are deal breakers. And these are the things that if they see this in your interview, one of these 6 things, they're not going to hire you. So you have to be careful to let them know that you don't have any of these 6 deal breakers. What are these 6 deal breakers in a gig interview? Being disrespectful, being inarticulate, they can't understand you, they can't make sense of what you're saying, being not believable, that something about what you're saying just strikes them as not true or not authentic, that you seem not to care, right? That you seem not to care if you get the gig, because if you don't care if you get the gig, you're not going to care if your work is very good. If you have no desire to grow, you're not interested in growth, you're not interested in learning, that's a big red flag, because that says to them that you're going to be stuck in one way of doing things. And finally, a big red flag in your interview is anytime you blame other people, because when you blame other people, that says to your interviewer that you actually don't take responsibility for your own mistakes and your own actions. So how do you let your potential employer know? How do you let the interviewers know that you don't have these 6 deal breakers? You got to send them 6 signals, right? Here are the 6 desired signals that you want to send in your gig interview. First of all, that you're respectful, that you're articulate, that you're authentic, that you speak honestly, that you're motivated. You want this gig. You want to do a good job. You're motivated. You love what you do, that you're eager to learn. You're always looking for growth opportunities. You embrace any opportunity to grow. And finally, that you're accountable for your own actions. You take responsibility for your mistakes and for your failures. So I want to talk about each of these signals and give you some ways that you can demonstrate and send these signals during your gig interview. Let's start with respectful. Really easy. 3 things. First of all, be on time. Because if you're not on time, if you're late, that shows a lack of respect for the interviewer's time. So you want to make sure you're on time. And by the way, for an interview, on time is not on time. On time for an interview is 10 minutes early. So most of you, I think all of you, have your interviews over video. Always log on 10 minutes before the interview time. Your appearance, make an effort to look clean and well groomed and like you've made an effort, because making that effort shows that you have respect for the organization or the company, for your interviewers, and for the time they're taking to interview you. That shows respect for the opportunity. And finally, the language that you use. Obviously, never curse in an interview, but also if you're going to disagree, you have to disagree respectfully. And of course, one way to show your sign of respect, never ever interrupt an interviewer. Okay, so now let's talk about how you send the second signal, that you're articulate. So first of all, you need to be audible, right? So make sure that they can hear you. Test your microphone in advance. Make sure you're not mumbling. You want to speak clearly, right? So what does that mean? It means you want to articulate your words. You want to make sure that you're being heard and understood. So again, not mumbling, and you want to be concise. So you want to avoid rambling, you want to avoid going off on tangents, and you want to avoid repeating yourself. So how do you make sure that you're audible, clear, and concise? Well, you got to practice, but I also recommend that you record yourself. Record yourself doing some interview answers just to see, ask yourself when you watch the recording, am I audible? Am I clear? Am I concise? All right, so now let's talk about the third signal. They want to know that you're authentic, right? You need to be believable. They need to trust that you're speaking honestly. So never lie in an interview, please, ever. First of all, you will likely get caught if you try to lie in an interview. You'll get caught with a follow-up question. The minute the interviewer feels like you're not telling them the truth, it's a deal breaker. There is no reason ever to lie in an interview. Please don't make stuff up. You should be prepared to talk about examples. You don't need to make one up that didn't actually happen. Because if they follow up with a question to kind of probe a little bit more, it's going to be really apparent really quickly that you're just making it up. And don't exaggerate. You don't need to lie, make stuff up, or exaggerate in an interview. Always speak honestly in an interview and send the signal that you are authentic. So part of authenticity is this. Interviewing is actually a speaking skill. And I know a lot of people prepare for interviews by writing out their answers first. Here's the problem with writing out your answers first in complete sentences. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to read it during your interview? Are you going to try to memorize it and recite it during your interview? First of all, you can't possibly think up every question that they're going to ask you and try to write out and memorize and recite an answer. It's just a very inefficient way to try to prepare for your interview. But also, even if you did write it out and memorize it, reciting a memorized answer doesn't sound authentic. Reading a memorized answer doesn't sound authentic. Interviewing is a speaking skill, and the only way to get good at it is to practice. So I recommend that rather than writing out complete sentences, use 1, 2, or 3 word bullet points and practice talking through those bullet points. Practice talking through your answer out loud. Remember, interviewing is a speaking skill. The only way to practice it is to talk out loud and speak. All right, let's talk about the fourth signal, motivated, right? They want to know that you really want the job, that you're motivated to work for them, and that you're motivated to do a good job because you love what you do. There are 3 ways that you can let them know how motivated you are. And the first one is probably the most important one, and that's with your research. So now, before I talk about the research, I want to acknowledge that I know for Topcoder members, you are often not given a lot of information. I have seen those gig listings, and I know that sometimes all you have is, this is the industry and this is the geographical area, and that's all you know. Well, even if that's all you know, you can still do some research. What are the challenges of that industry in that geographical area? Who are the players in that industry, in that geographical area? Because I've got news for you. If you research who the players are, you are either interviewing with one of those players, or one of those players is the competition of the company you're interviewing with. So at least know who the big 3 players are in that industry. Now, sometimes you'll have more information, right? Sometimes you'll have the name of the company. When you do, then you need to do even more research. So you want to look at the company's website. You want to look at everything on the company's website, and you want to figure out, what is the company's overall mission here? Is it to make the world a better place? Is it to make money? Like, what is their big mission? What do they care about? And how does what you're being hired to do in this gig fit in with the company's big mission? That's what you want to figure out. What do they want to accomplish? What is their product? What is their service? Who is their market? Who's their competition? And how does what you're being potentially hired to do fit in with their overall mission? There are a lot of places you can look. Like I said, the company website, you can Google the company. I also recommend, it's free to join, glassdoor.com can give you a lot of insight into kind of the company culture. So that is one important way. Doing your research lets them know that you care. And I got to tell you something. It really is important. I've talked to so many hiring managers in the tech industry that tell me that if it's very clear that the candidate hasn't done any research, doesn't even know who the company is. I've talked to hiring managers from Google, VMware, startups in Silicon Valley. They're like, if it's clear that this candidate doesn't know anything about us, doesn't know who we are, doesn't know the industry we're in, they're much less likely to hire them. 47% of interviewers in a 2018 study said they just wouldn't offer the job to someone it was clear they did no research. So how do you send a signal that you're motivated? First, with your research. Number two, with the questions that you ask at the end of the interview when they say, do you have any questions for us, right? So here's, first of all, I recommend that you always be ready to ask a question. Why? Because if they say, do you have any questions for us? And you say, no, I'm good, I have no questions, that shows that you're not curious. And a lack of curiosity means to them that you don't really care. Because if you really cared, you'd want to know more. You'd be curious. You'd want to know more about them. So always have questions ready to ask. What kind of questions should you ask? Well, first of all, the questions that you ask should reflect the research that you've done, right? You want to let them know with these questions that you've done your research. And then also your questions should show your curiosity to know more. Be careful that your questions are relevant to the person who's interviewing you. So if you're being interviewed by somebody in HR, for example, you wouldn't ask them a really technical question. But in general, you want to make sure that you have at least 2 questions to ask that reflect the research that you've done and show your natural curiosity. So whenever you see this particular graphic, this target with the darts and it says prepare, this is my way of saying, like, this is something you should be ready with. This is something you should do before your interview. And the first thing is you should prepare 2 questions to ask at the end. Okay, we're talking about the 4th signal. We're talking about how important it is that they know that you care, that you're motivated, that you love what you do and you're motivated to get the gig and you want to do a good job. And the first way you're going to show them is with your research. The second way you're going to show them is with the questions that you ask. And the third way you can show them is by following up. And I need to tell you, I know that most Topcoder members don't follow up after the interview, and I'm sure there's a variety of reasons for that. I know that about only 25% of you tell me that you send a note at the end saying thank you. 20% of you in the survey said you never send a follow-up note. So I know it can be challenging, but you need to know that 1 in 5 interviewers dismiss a candidate because they didn't get that thank you note. It can never hurt you. And if it's between you and someone else and the other person doesn't send that follow-up note and you do, that could be the thing that gets you the gig because it really lets them know that you're motivated. So I understand that sometimes it could be difficult to know where to send that thank you note. So my recommendation is if you have an email contact for the person who interviewed you, great. Go ahead and send a note the day of the interview, after the interview, thanking them for the opportunity to interview. If you don't have that email address, you can go to the company website. Sometimes they list everyone's email address under the directory or under staff or under our leaders. You can find them on the company website. And if that doesn't work, LinkedIn. Very often people list their email address on LinkedIn. And if they don't, you can message them on LinkedIn. Just say wanted to connect and let you know, really grateful for the opportunity to interview today. But that little step, and you do it the day of the interview or at least within 24 hours, can make a real difference in getting the gig. Okay, so we're talking about the 6 desired signals to make sure that they know you don't have any of those 6 deal breakers. We've talked about be respectful. We've talked about be articulate. We've talked about be authentic. We've talked about letting them know you're motivated with your research and with the follow-up questions and by following up. The last 2 signals are probably the most important. They want to know that you're eager to learn and they want to know that you're accountable. So what do I mean by that? When I say eager learner, I mean they want an employee that wants to learn and improve, meaning they want an employee that looks for growth opportunities and will welcome feedback because Getting feedback is an opportunity to learn, right? And when I say accountable, they want an employee that takes responsibility for their mistakes and their failures. What they don't want is an employee that blames other people or that complains, right? So they're looking for someone that doesn't blame other people and who doesn't complain, because those kinds of employees are the employees that when they make a mistake say, oh, this was my fault. How can I learn from it? How can I make sure I don't do that again? And the other kind of employee is the one that says, I made a mistake. Not me, somebody else did it. So you don't want to be that kind of employee, and they don't want to hire the kind of employee that blames other people. So these two signals are so important that there are 4 common questions. And I'm sure if you've been to an interview, been asked one of these questions, but what you may not realize is the reason why they're asking these 4 questions is specifically looking for those 2 signals, being an eager learner and being accountable. What are the 4 questions? Tell me about a mistake. Tell me about a time you failed. What is your biggest weakness? And tell me about a time you received negative feedback. So I'm going to talk to you about each one of these, and I'm going to give you a strategy for each one of these. The first one we're going to talk about is tell me about a time you made a mistake, or tell me about a time you failed. So your employers know that you have made mistakes in the past. They know this because everybody has. They also know that you will probably make a mistake in the future while you're working for them, because everybody makes mistakes. What they want to know is, when you make a mistake, are you the kind of employee that says, that wasn't my mistake, that was somebody else's mistake, and is quick to blame other people? Or are you the kind of employee that says, I'm sorry, that was my mistake, and then you learn from the mistake. You figure out what you did wrong, and then you change something so that you never make that mistake again. Same thing about failing. Everybody who has ever been successful, everybody, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, everybody who has ever been successful first failed, right? You have had failures in your life. They know this because everybody has. You will probably still have failures in your life. They know this because everybody does. What they want to know is, when you fail, are you the kind of person that blames other people for that failure? Or are you the kind of person that says, how can I take responsibility for this? What can I do differently next time so that I don't fail? So when you choose an example to tell them about, tell me about a time you made a mistake, or tell me about a time you failed, you need to choose a failure or mistake that in your heart you know really was your fault. What you don't want to do, and what so many people do and answer this question, and they get it wrong, is to choose a failure or mistake that somebody else did and talk about how you came in and saved the day. All that says to your interviewers is that they've asked you to admit when you made a mistake or had a failure, and you haven't been able to admit a single one. You could only talk about other people's failures and mistakes. That's a big red flag to them. They want to know that you're willing to take responsibility and accountability for your failures and mistakes. So choose a time when in your heart you know this really was your fault. Tell them the mistake or the failure, and then tell them what you did to own it. Who did you go to and say, I'm sorry, this was my fault? Did you have to go to a supervisor? Did you have to go to your teammates? Did you have to say it to the client? What was that moment when you took accountability and ownership of the mistake or the failure? Tell them that moment, and then tell them what you did to fix it. How did you rectify the situation? Then tell them the change you put in place to make sure that nothing like that would ever happen again. What did you say? I'm going to do things differently from now on so that I don't repeat that mistake or repeat that failure. And finally, what lesson did you learn from the whole situation that made you more successful later on? So this is the strategy that I recommend. And I recommend that you prepare an answer to tell me about a time you made a mistake, or tell me about a time you had a failure. Usually you can use one for both, and that you prepare it in this strategy. I thought it might be helpful for all of you to see the strategy executed by a Topcoder member. And we were lucky enough that I did have a couple of Topcoder members volunteer to work privately with me so that we could record them executing some of these skills. So the first one I'm going to show you is Safa. Safa's here today in the webinar. Hi, Safa. Thank you so much for your time. Safa is from Turkey, and this is Safa executing for you guys. Tell me about a time you made a mistake or had a failure, and notice how he uses this strategy. He's going to say what the failure was. He's going to say the moment that he took ownership. He's going to tell you what he did to fix it, the change he put in place so it would never happen again, and the lesson he learned that made him more successful later. So this is Safa.
Nearly 10 years ago, when I was 25 and became a team leader first time in an office, and my supervisor was much older than me, and I might be seen as confident to myself, and I did not ask any questions to him to what might be done and what can be I learned from him. But 1 month later that but I started that work, and supervision board came to investigate us, and it was very badly that we lost that inspection. After that, I went to my supervisor and say, I am sorry, sir, that this is my fault. I might be communicate with you and ask questions. How might I be prepared for the inspection and what might be done? So I fixed them up and make some programs and systems. And 1 year later, same investigation board came and we passed it. After that, what I made differently from that time is whenever I start a new project or a new team leadership, I made a point to communicate and ask questions to my supervisor and with my teammates. When I learned what I learned from this experiment, to be a confident leader and asking questions, it can be done both. Asking questions and gathering information at the start of a new project or a new job has helped me to be a confident and successful leadership both. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Safa, for doing that. So I recommend that you guys prepare an answer to tell me about a time you made a mistake or had a failure using that strategy. Okay, let's talk about the next one. Let's talk about what is your weakness. Again, this is an important question because the hiring managers want to know a couple of things. They want to know, everybody has something they need to learn. Everyone does. Do you know what yours is? Do you evaluate your own growth? Are you self-aware? And when you assess that there's an area in which you could grow and improve, do you take steps? So they're evaluating your commitment to your own professional improvement. And finally, they're evaluating your ability to handle critical feedback. If you're given critical feedback, are you going to welcome it as an opportunity to grow and learn, or are you going to get defensive and be stuck in one way of doing things? So I want to talk about 2 ways not to answer this question. I'm going to give you 2 wrong answers. Please don't do these 2 things. The first one is when asked, what is your weakness, to answer, I have no weaknesses. And the reason why this is a horrible answer is because, as I said, everybody has ways in which they can grow and improve as a professional in their field. When you say, I have no weaknesses, what you're saying is you actually don't know what those things are for you. They're there, but you don't know what they are. So I don't recommend that you answer what is your weakness by trying to make like you have no weaknesses. The second really horrible answer is to spin a strength as a weakness, right? Answering what is your weakness with something like, my biggest weakness is overthinking things, or my biggest weakness is I'm too much of a perfectionist. Okay, first of all, we all know that those aren't really weaknesses, right? When you say your biggest weakness is overthinking things, we know that's a strength. We know what you're really saying is, I'm super thoughtful, I pay close attention to detail, I make sure everything's done right. When you say my biggest weakness is I'm a perfectionist, we know what you're really saying is you have a very high standard of commitment to excellence in the work that you do everything perfectly. Nobody thinks those are really weaknesses. So when you answer what is your weakness by spinning a strength as a weakness, it says the same thing as I have no weaknesses. It says to your interviewer that you actually don't know what it is you need to work on. And it says to your interviewer, it's kind of an insult that you would think that they might think that what you're telling them is actually a weakness when we all know it's really a strength. So please don't answer what is your weakness with either of these strategies. Here's a strategy that I recommend for answering what is your weakness. And that is to think of an area that you've been working on improving that is not a core requirement for that gig. You don't want to pick something that is expected to be a strength already. You want to pick a knowledge, skill, or ability, excuse me, that is not a core requirement for the gig, but if you had it, would make you a more desirable professional in your field. For example, perhaps in your field, if you knew another language, because you work a lot with another country that speaks another language, perhaps that would make you a more desirable professional. It's not required for the gig, but maybe you're working on learning that language. Maybe there's an area of what you do that's not required for the gig, but if you knew it, would really help you in what you do, would make you a more valuable professional. Maybe you're working on giving more impactful presentations, not required for the gig, but you know that if you could give better presentations, more impactful presentations to clients, you'd be a more valuable professional. So once you've figured out a knowledge base or skill or ability that's not required for the gig, but that would make you a more valuable professional, tell them what it is and tell them 3 things that you've already done to try to learn in that area or improve in that area. 3 steps. So if you're trying to give, one of the things you're trying to do is learn how to give more impactful presentations, maybe you're watching YouTube videos, maybe you're working more in PowerPoint, maybe you're volunteering to give presentations for your team. Tell them the 3 steps you've already taken and tell them the progress you've made so far, right? You must have made some progress so far if you've already taken 3 steps, but conclude by letting them know you're still working on this. This is very much something that you are currently working on. So again, I thought it might be useful for you to see the strategy executed. This time we have Kirabel. Kirabel's from Ethiopia. I think Kirabel's here today too. So Kirabel, thank you so much for working with me on this so that the webinar participants can see this strategy executed. And as you listen to Kirabel execute this strategy, I want you to listen for the 4 strategy points that he says what the knowledge or skill or ability is. He says the 3 things he's already done to try to improve, the progress he's made, and he ends with saying, this is something I am still working on. So this is Kirabel.
One thing I'm trying to improve is working in front-end web development. I am primarily a back-end software engineer, but I want to know more on front-end software development to become a full-stack software engineer and be more desirable in the software development market. So far, I have learned Vue.js framework on front-end development, and I've also read articles on patterns and development best practices on how to develop software products as a front-end engineer. I also watch YouTube videos describing on how to develop front-end software product. Because of those measures, I was able to develop a small website, both as a front-end and back-end software engineer. But I still have a lot of frameworks and patterns to learn in developing software products as a front-end engineer. So I'll continue doing the learning on that.
Thank you so much, Kirabel, for doing that. So I recommend that you prepare an answer to what is your weakness, talking about an area that you've been working on improving. Okay. Let's talk about, tell me about a time you received negative feedback. One of the skills and abilities they want to see, one of those 12, is that you can take feedback well. So here's a strategy for that. Tell them the feedback you got, tell them 3 steps you took to implement that feedback, and tell them the lesson you learned or the success that was achieved when you implemented that feedback. So here we go. Prepare and practice. Have these ready before your interview. Have an answer ready to what is your weakness that talks about an area you're working on improving and 3 things you've already done to try to get better in that area. Tell me about a mistake or a failure. Talking about a failure or mistake that you know was your fault and telling them what you learned from the experience and how it made you a more successful professional in the future. And tell me about a time you received negative feedback so they know that when you get negative feedback, you embrace that as a learning opportunity. And remember, as you're preparing these answers, please remember that interviewing is a speaking skill. Don't write out complete sentences. Use 1, 2, or 3 word bullet points and practice talking through your answer out loud. Okay, so we're talking about interviews. We've talked about interviews are about technical skills, and we've talked about that you guys know how to prepare for the technical questions. I can't help you prepare for those. We've talked about the 6 deal breakers and the 6 desired signals that you want to send. Now let's talk about those 12 behavioral skills and abilities. Specifically, what questions are you going to be asked in a gig interview that are designed to find out whether or not you have these 12 skills or ability? Let's talk about the questions you might get. So for willingness to learn, we already know that you're going to be asked, what is your weakness? We already know that you're going to be asked, tell me about a time you made a mistake or had a failure. Those both are looking at your willingness to learn. You might also be asked, tell me about a time when you had to learn something new for a project. Taking feedback well, we know that they're going to ask you, tell me about a time you received negative or critical feedback. For verbal communication, they might ask you, tell me about a time you convinced a client to chart a different course for a project. Or tell me about a time you had to explain something that was complex in a simple way. Or tell me about a time you had to articulate your vision to a client or your team. Speaking of teams, teamwork and collaboration, they might ask you, tell me about a time you went above and beyond to support a teammate, or tell me about a time you worked effectively with other IT personnel, or tell me about a time when you had to work closely with somebody whose background or culture or function was very different than yours. Conflict resolution, tell me about a time you had to deal with an underperforming team member. Tell me it's about a time you had conflict while working on your team. Embracing a challenge. Tell me about a time you overcame a difficult challenge. Tell me about a time you were under a lot of pressure. Flexible, adaptable. Give me an example of a time when you had to change course quickly. Tell me about a time you had to integrate changing project parameters into your approach. Time management, they might ask, tell me about a time you juggled multiple priorities and met all your deliverables, or tell me about a time that you took the initiative. Client face, oh, that's working independently. Tell me about a time you took the initiative. Tell me about a time you worked independently. For time management, sorry. Time management was, tell me about a time you juggled multiple priorities and met all your deadlines. Work independently. Client service. Tell me about a time when you delivered exceptional client service. Tell me about a time you had a difficult client. Leadership or project management. Tell me about a project you led. Tell me about a time you had to resolve conflict between members of your team. And finally, with integrity, tell me about a time you went the extra mile to make sure your deliverables were met on time. Tell me about a time you went above and beyond to ensure a high quality product. So, in order to demonstrate that you have these behavioral skills, you need to do 2 things. First of all, you need to specify what your strength is in that area, and then you need to give a specific example. This is how, in a behavioral interview, you demonstrate that you have one of those 12 behavioral skills or abilities. So let's talk about this. How do you specify your strength? I recommend that you develop a skill called an I statement, and you specify your strength with an I statement. What is an I statement? An I statement is a very simple sentence that says one of 2 things. It either says, I am very good at that, or it says, I have successfully done that before. So the thing about an I statement is you want it to be specific and you want it to be strong. So what do I mean by specific? Listen, when we're talking about verbal communication, if you were in an interview and you said, I'm really great at verbal communication, what does that mean? Like, what is it exactly when it comes to verbal communication that you're good at? Be specific about what your strength is in that area. Are you good at presenting a vision? Are you great at having consistent communication with your team members? Maybe you're a pro at explaining complex technical concepts to clients. All of these are specific skills within verbal communication. So be specific. When it comes to verbal communication, what is it exactly that you're good at? And when it comes to teamwork, what makes you good at teamwork? Right? You can't just say, I'm good at teamwork. Like, what does that even mean? Be specific. Are you good at working well with others? Are you the kind of team member that pitches in whenever needed? Do you have lots of experience collaborating with people from other functions in the organization? And when it comes to leadership, what is it that makes you a good leader? Specifically, what is it you're good at when it comes to leadership? Are you good at motivating and inspiring your team? Are you good at delegating tasks appropriately? Maybe you're a pro at leveraging and maximizing resources. So you don't just say, I'm great at leadership. Be specific about what makes you such a good leader. And finally, with client service, right? What is it that makes you good at client service? Are you good at dealing with difficult clients? Do you go the extra mile for clients? Are you really good at managing a client's expectations? So you want to be specific in these I statements, and you want to be strong, right? So instead of just saying, I'm good at it, try out some of these. You know, one of my strengths is juggling lots of priorities effectively. I excel at adapting to changing circumstances. My specialty is precise attention to detail. I'm all about clear communication with my team. And if you want to say I've done it before successfully, great. Try, I'm highly experienced at cross-functional collaboration. I have a proven ability to come up with innovative solutions. I have a long track record of successful project management. So here are some starters that you can use for an I statement. Take a look at them. See if you can find 3 or 4 or 5 that you'd be comfortable with. I understand not everybody's going to be comfortable with my superpower is, but I excel at. I have a proven ability to. One of my strengths is, my specialty is, I'm a big believer in. Find some of these that are strong and then use them to tell them specifically what it is you're good at. That's an I statement. You want to use an I statement at the beginning of your answer in an interview to let them know exactly what it is that you are good at. So I recommend that this is a skill that you get comfortable with, that you get the ability to create strong and specific I statements about your skills and abilities in those 12 areas. So how do you demonstrate those 12 behavioral skills? First, you want to specify your strength with an I statement, and then you need to give a specific example. So you want to think of a specific time when you demonstrated that particular behavioral skill. So you want to be prepared to give an example of a time you did some things that they want to know, right? A time when you communicated effectively, a time when you collaborated with others, when you resolved conflict, when you learned a new skill quickly or adapted to an unexpected change, when you persisted in the face of an obstacle, or you juggled multiple priorities, or took the initiative without being told, or went above and beyond for a client, or successfully led a team facing a challenge. This is a lot. This is a lot. I am not suggesting that you try to come up with 10 or 11 or 12 different examples. That's a lot to do before an interview. So here's what I recommend. I recommend that you think of 5 success stories, right? 5 times when you did a great job, or you overcame an obstacle, or you went above and beyond, or you succeeded beyond whatever the expectation is. Think of 5 times you did a great job, 5 times you were successful. And then you're going to take those stories and you're going to use those stories, those 5, one of them, anytime they ask you a question that starts, tell me about a time when, describe an example of a time when, any behavioral skill or ability, any of those 12 that we talked about. And you're going to use a strategy that I'm about to show you called a store scenario. So what is a story scenario strategy? A story scenario strategy is a strategy that when you're talking about these success stories, when you're giving these examples, it's a strategy to keep your message on track. It's meant to keep you concise, and it's meant to keep your story powerful. It keeps you from rambling and getting off topic on a tangent. So here's the strategy. The S stands for situation. Tell them what the situation was. What was the overall objective that needed to get met? What was your task in meeting that objective? What was your particular role in addressing the situation? What made it hard? What were all the obstacles to executing your task, right? Was there not enough time? Did the client have unrealistic expectations? Was your team in 10 different time zones? Did COVID hit and people couldn't come? I mean, all different things that made it difficult. Was there not enough money? Was there not enough resources? All the things that made executing your task harder. Then tell them at least 3 things, 3 actions you took to overcome the obstacles and execute your task to resolve the situation. You want to break what you did down into steps. Where you tell them the actions, this is where they see how good you are. So you really want to break down what you did into steps and finally tell them the successful result of the story. So I recommend that you take those 5 success stories and you create a story scenario. And to help you do that, I have some sentence starters. I recommend that you write these down. You can even memorize them. If you memorize these 5 sentence starters, and you can use them to tell any story, even if they ask you a question in the interview and you're not quite prepared to tell that story, you've never told it before. If you use these 5 sentence starters, if you use the story scenario strategy, you will be able to tell the story in a concise and powerful way. So the first one is for the situation. The situation was, or the overall objective was, and tell them where you were working, tell them, what your role was, and what was the big problem that needed to be addressed. Like, what was the overall objective of this situation? And then tell them what your task was in meeting that objective. So my task was, or my role was, or my goal was, and then tell them all the things that made it hard. What made it difficult was, and then tell them all the obstacles that were in the way of you being able to easily achieve that task. And then, so what I did was, and again, you're going to break it down into at least 3 things that you did so they can see how good you are. And finally, as a result of what I did, and you want to say as a result of what I did, so they understand that the result came about of the actions that you took. And those actions were there to overcome the obstacle and execute your task and resolve the situation. So I thought it might be useful for you to see an example of the story scenario strategy. So this is Jared. This is one of my clients. And Jared is not in the technical field. However, he is a team leader for one of the big 4 firms. He's a strategy consultant. And this is a time he overcame an obstacle. By the way, this is one of his success stories. So he could use this success story for a lot of things. He could use it for overcoming an obstacle. He could use it for leading a team to get on the same page. He could use it about communication. You'll see he could use the story to answer lots of different questions. But as you're listening, what I want you to listen for, I want you to listen for those 5 sentence starters. The situation was, my task was, what made it difficult was, so what I did was, and as a result of what I did. So this is Jared.
The situation was, I was on a team that was comprised of multiple smaller teams that were working together to build a technology solution, but having some trouble doing it. My role on the team was to take these 2 component teams, help them work together, and ultimately, build the solution that the client had requested. What made it difficult, though, was that on top of the fact that we had pretty intensive requirements from the client and not a lot of time to get it all done, the 2 groups were very different. One group was computer developers who spoke in, code in their own very specific language, and the other group was, sort of functional, less technical and focused on business and profit and revenue. And so when you put these 2 groups together, and they had to work together closely to develop the solution effectively, There was a lot of miscommunication. People were getting very frustrated with each other because they were just crossing wires a lot in email communication, at meetings, and with expectations. So what I did was, well, first I recognized what the problem was, that it was more than just we were, under these really strict timelines and facing a lot of requirements, but more that the two teams weren't communicating well. So I set up a one-on-one meeting with the partner of the project, the senior leadership, and proposed that, despite the timelines we had to keep up with, that we needed to take a little bit of time to reset and work together more effectively as a collective team. So my proposal was to set up a meeting for these two teams, kind of our whole team, to come together and develop a stronger team culture ultimately. And so the partner agreed that was a good idea. And I went about setting up a meeting and building an agenda to not only get each of us to know each other better on the level of, who we are as people and rather than just as colleagues, but also to kind of set expectations for how we communicate as a team, what meetings should look like, and how people would ask that they get tasked with work, for example. So in the meeting, I facilitated the entire, multiple hour-long meeting, gave everyone a chance to kind of speak their mind and be heard, and establish, the kind of team culture that they wanted to be a part of. And then ultimately after the meeting, consolidated all these insights into an actionable plan that immediately thereafter we put into place. I put into place, and as a result of that meeting and that kind of step back, the reset, if you will, we were able to, notwithstanding some additional hurdles, of course, but really, kind of grow as a team together and ultimately deliver a really high quality solution for the clients they were really impressed and happy with.
So I hope you heard all of the 5 sentence starters, and he could use this for, tell me about a time you were able to establish a positive team culture. Tell me about a time you went above and beyond to ensure that a client was happy. Okay, so I recommend that you prepare 5 success stories, turn those into store scenarios. And remember, as you're doing that interviewing is a speaking skill, so please don't write out complete sentences, use bullet points, and practice talking through your answers out loud. Let me tell you another way you can use those success stories, those store scenarios. Anytime they say, tell me about a time, and they're not looking for a specific skill, but they ask those general questions like, tell me about a time, about your favorite project. Tell me what your supervisors might say about you. Tell me about a success you had. The strategy you could use for these kinds of questions is an I statement combined with a success store scenario. So instead of racking your brain, what am I going to say for a favorite project? Use one of those success stories, right? And start by making sure that you specify the strength that you have so that your listener and your interviewer understands what they're listening for in the store scenario. So this is an example. This is Kirabel again. Kirabel is going to execute what it sounds like when you put together the I statement with the store scenario. So he could use this success story to answer, tell me about a time you overcame an obstacle. There are lots of questions he could use this success story for, but I want you to listen both for the I statement and for the store scenario strategy sentence starters, right? The overall objective was, or the situation was, my task was, what made it difficult was, so what I did was, and as a result of what I did. So this is Kirabel. In response to, tell me about a time you led a team to overcome an obstacle.
I consider myself to be an effective leader. I'll give you an example. The situation was that I became the technical lead for our online and mobile team in Paga. The team comprised of 3 junior software engineers and 2 manual testers. Our task was to deliver the peer-to-peer payment transfer system on our online and mobile platform my task was to create the architecture for the product and help with the junior engineers in achieving their tasks. What made it difficult was we didn't have a project manager on our team. And some of the junior software engineers weren't delivering their tasks in a timely manner. I wasn't able to understand what was blocking them at the time. So what I did was I became the project manager of the team, and I identified the problems causing the delays in performance. One of the problems that I found was a communication problem. So I changed our process from Kanban to Scrum. So in Scrum, we had daily stand-ups in which those junior software engineer tells me what was blocking them in achieving their tasks. So I helped them daily with their blocking problems. As a result of what I did, those junior software engineers started performing as they were supposed to, and we were able to finish our project in a timely manner. So.
Excellent. And again, that story can be used, that success story can be used to answer lots of different questions. So when you put together an I statement with a store scenario, what you end up with is you have effectively demonstrated one of those 12 behavioral skills that they're looking for. I want to talk about 2 more strategies. Okay, before we get to your questions, I want to talk about, tell me about a time you had conflict with a team member or a supervisor. And of course, the big one, tell me about yourself. So let's start with questions about conflict. And the first thing I want to say is, when you are thinking of an example to tell them, and you should always prepare one ahead of time because this is a very common question, realize that it's the story that you tell should not be about how you won the conflict, right? They're not interested in making sure that when you have a conflict, you win. What they're interested in is they're interested in your conflict resolution skills, specifically that you can disagree respectfully, that you listen to other people's perspectives, that you don't just steamroll them into caving, but that you take the time to really solicit and listen to what other people have to say, and that you know how to resolve conflict in a collaborative way. So what you're looking for is you want to pick a time when you handled it privately. These are things they're going to be listening for. Did you handle the situation privately, or did you confront them in a group? You want to pick one where you handled it privately. Did you ask for the other person's perspective? Did you listen when the other person gave you their perspective? Did you let them know that you could understand their position? And were you able to problem solve together? So these are the things they're listening for. So when you choose a conflict to tell them about, think about a time when you collaboratively problem solve. Think about a time when you ask somebody for their perspective. It's not about a time you won the conflict. It's about a time you were able to problem solve together. So prepare an answer to tell me about a time you had conflict with a team member or supervisor. Let's talk about tell me about yourself. Okay. Sometimes they call this the elevator pitch. When they say tell me about yourself, I recommend that you prepare an answer that uses the 5 S's. What are the 5 S's? The first one is your spark. What it is you love about what you do. Like, what do you love about it? Why are you in this field? What is the spark? And what's a summary? Give them a 1-sentence summary of your experience. Successes. Describe a signature project or 2 that you've already done. What are some of your strengths? This is where you get to use that I statement skill. Tell them 3 things that you're really good at. And finally, what are you going to solve for them? Tell them what you're going to do for them. So spark, summary, successes, strengths, and solve. Let me give you some sentence starters to help you. When it comes to spark, I recommend that you start with something like I love to, or I'm passionate about. When it comes to summary, Tell them, I have this many years experience as a whatever it is that you are, front-end developer, back-end developer, full-stack developer, data scientist. I have completed X number of projects. I have completed X number of projects for these kinds of companies. Just a one-sentence summary of what you've done in your career. Then describe a signature project. This is not a full story scenario. This is 1 or 2 sentences that just give them a sense as to the scope of the kind of work that you've done in the past. And you can describe 1 or 2 projects. And then give them 3 I statements, right? My specialties are, I excel at, I have a proven ability to. Let them know 3 things that you're good at that they want for that gig. And finally, what are you going to solve for them? I will solve whatever the problem is they're hiring you to solve. I will build whatever it is they're hiring you to build. Or even better, I will support your mission to whatever you learned their mission was when you did that research by doing whatever it is they're hiring you to do. Okay. I thought you might like to see an example of the 5 S's. So these are 5 S's that you could use for tell me about yourself. This particular person is someone I've worked with. He is a technical team lead for a big tech company. And these are his 5 S's. He started his Spark with, I love to take things that are hard and make them easy. His summary sentence was, I have 15 years experience of doing that as a technical leader on a wide variety of projects. His successes were, I recently completed a major project automating the install of a manual product and ensuring that all of the operations work smoothly 24/7, 365. His strengths were, I excel at leading diverse teams to work together. My specialty is finding each team member's strength and applying those strengths to the project. I have a proven ability to resolve conflicts and keep team discussions collaborative. My superpower is meeting all of my deadlines by prioritizing efficiently. So he's done 4. And then I will find the simplest way to solve this problem, complete this project on time, and provide your customers with the best possible product. So that is an example of tell me about yourself, elevator pitch using the 5 S's: Spark, summary, successes, strengths, and solve. So I recommend that you prepare an answer to tell me about yourself using the 5 S's. So let's review what we've learned so far, right? I recommend that you prepare and practice answers to common questions that you can expect to get in your gig interviews. Tell me about yourself using the 5S strategy. Tell me about a conflict, talking about a time, not that you won, but where you listen to the other person's perspective and you solve the problem together. What is your weakness? Talking about an area that you're working on improving because it will make you a more desirable professional in your field. Tell me about a mistake or a failure. Talking about a time where you made a mistake or you had a failure, you took accountability for it, and you learned from it. A time you received feedback, prepare to tell a story of a time when you got feedback and you implemented it. And then any questions for us, make sure you have at least 2 questions that reflect your research and show your curiosity to ask them at the end of the interview. And I recommend that you practice the skill of creating strong and specific I statements to be able to articulate exactly what it is that you're good at in those areas that your interviewers are looking for. And finally, prepare 5 success stories, turn them into store scenarios using those 5 store scenario sentence starters. And those store scenarios of the 5 success stories will probably demonstrate a lot of the skills and abilities that are part of those skills and abilities that your gig interviewers are looking for. So my company is Impressive Interviewing. I want to thank you for your attention and participation. I have free tips on my website, www.impressiveinterviewing.com. And with that, I am happy to take your questions. So let me go to I'm going to stop sharing. And let me go to the Q&A and see what you've got. Okay. Very good. So the question is, authenticity makes you vulnerable too. What is the level of authenticity you should go in an interview? So I understand exactly what you mean. You don't, I think I do. I take that question to mean like, you don't want to be so authentic that you share something that would cause them to not hire you, right? So again, I think that when we've talked about what is your weakness, you want to give an authentic answer, you want to be believable, but you don't need to tell them actually what you're bad at. right? If it's something that would cause them not to hire you. By answering the question, you want to be honest. So authenticity is about being honest. You can be honest without saying anything negative about yourself. Okay, how to answer the question, what was your most challenging moment and how did you solve it? That's an I statement in a story scenario, right? So when you come up with your 5 success stories, one of those success stories you can probably use to answer what was one of your most challenging moments and how did you solve it. But I say something about the way this question is posed. Whenever they say most challenging, tell me about your favorite project. Tell me about your most challenging project. It's okay in your answer for you to reframe it. It's okay for you to say, you know, I'm really proud of many challenging moments that I've gotten through. I'll tell you about one. Don't think you have to pick like the one that is the most, and they're going to think, well, that, you know, maybe there was something more challenging. Like, don't worry about the most in that question, right? If they say, what was your favorite project? You can start by saying, I have a lot of projects I've really loved. I'll tell you about one of them. And then go ahead with that I statement and star scenario. How to answer that question when you're a beginner and you have no experience? Well, if you're a top coder, you have some experience, right? You've had experience solving problems. Again, it's okay to tell them a story about how you learned from making a mistake. Like, that's okay. That can be a challenging moment. As long as you're delivering the message at the end that when you have a challenge, if you make a mistake, you learn from it. Is it okay to refer references during discussion or project UNLs? I apologize that I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that question. So if it's possible for you to clarify that, either verbally, like if Corey can let you speak, or if you could put something else, is it okay to refer to references during discussion? Yes, it's okay. I mean, certainly if you're talking about a project, to say who you work for. And at the end of the discussion, it's always okay to say, you know, would you like some more references? Or I have references if you'd like them. Is being too direct in an interview will give a bad impact to your interviewer. Well, not if you're respectful. You can be direct and you can be respectful at the same time. What about an interview for more than an hour guarantee that we're getting the job offer? Unfortunately, there's no guarantee. You can interview for an hour and still not get the job offer. Leaving the gig universe for a moment, when you're interviewing for jobs, sometimes you go through 5 rounds of interviews and it's between you and one other person, and you've both been through 5 rounds of interviews. Or in the gig universe, maybe there's 2 people who've interviewed for an hour. One of them's getting it, one of them's not. So unfortunately, no. By the way, and just because your interview is only 5 minutes doesn't mean you didn't get it. Don't try to be a mind reader in an interview. Don't try to guess what the interviewer's thinking or how well you did. Just prepare. Make sure that you are prepared. Have your success stories. Practice your I statements. Have your store scenarios. Deliver your messages effectively, that you are good at those things that they're looking for, those 12 skills and ability. If you deliver those messages effectively, you don't need to worry about trying to be a mind reader. If they ask me, tell us why you think you are the best candidate for this gig or job, how should I answer this question? So I recommend for this answer that you think about what their overall mission is, right? What is it that outside of this gig that you're doing, how is that gig going to fit in with something which fits in with something that serves their overall mission? Right? And I suggest that you let them know when they say, why are you the best candidate? That you let them know that you understand that you are building the cog that's making the wheel go, that's letting the car go, that's getting them to where they need to be. So for example, and this is going to be a little rough, but you know, I will help you achieve your mission to, whether it's increase revenue or reduce pollution across the planet, whatever their mission is, right? I will help you achieve your mission by whatever it is this gig is a part of, telling them what you're going to do to achieve that, and let them know that you understand that you are playing one small role in a much bigger mission. You can also talk about some of those strengths that you have, right? Those 12 skills and abilities. When you look at those 12 skills and ability, pick the 3 that you think are the most important ones for you to get that gig interview. Pick the 3 that are really your biggest strengths. Maybe it's teamwork. You're a really great team player, and really be prepared to articulate what specific strength you bring. So when they say, why are you the best candidate, or why should we hire you? You can do 2 things. You can tell them the 3 strengths that you bring and how those strengths will help them achieve their mission. What is the best strategy of handling the scenario that the interviewer doesn't understand my English? Yes. So first of all, just admitting in the beginning that, you know, English is not your native language and that this is something you're working on improving. I would definitely use that as the what is your weakness. But again, if you take the time to really prepare your answers and to prepare them in English, then your interviewer should be able to understand you if you've taken the time to prepare those 5 success stories and prepare those answers. If the interviewer is not understanding you, if they say, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean, say, I'm so sorry, I'm really working on my English, and then take a moment to say it a little bit differently. At the end of the interview, the manager said they will contact us 2 weeks later. What does that mean? Sometimes it means 2 weeks later and sometimes it doesn't. So here's my recommendation. I have a lot of clients ask me, like, should I call at the end of 2 weeks? Should I follow up? Should I send an email? So my general advice is the following. Wait for a week after when they said they're going to contact you, because the truth of the matter is these things often take a lot longer than they think it's going to take. Either there's too many candidates, there's not enough candidates, they're posting it somewhere else, they've changed the job description, they've decided somebody else needs to sign off on it. Who knows why these things take a long time? Don't try to be a mind reader. Don't try to think that because it's taking a long time, that means you didn't get it. You don't know. But if they say 2 weeks, wait 1 more week. And then I recommend that you follow up with an email. And all you need to say in the email is 2 things. Just want to let you know I'm still interested. Is there any other information I can offer that would be useful for you in making your decision? Would you like another reference? Would you like another whatever? That's it. Don't say, I'm following up because you said 2 weeks and it's been 3 weeks. Or I'm following up because I haven't heard from you. Don't make them wrong. Just say, just wanted to follow up to let you know I'm still interested, and to offer any additional information that might be useful to you in making your decision. Let's see what other ones we have here. I have faced a situation where I explained the answer correctly, but the interviewer argued that the answer is not correct, which on his or her part was wrong. How should I handle this conflict? I have to tell you, I spoke with a hiring manager at a big tech company who told me he does this on purpose. And he does it on purpose because he wants to see how you handle it, how you handle a conflict, and whether or not you can disagree respectfully. So remember what conflict resolution skills are. Ask him why he thinks that way. Listen, tell him that you or her, that you understand why they would think that, and then explain your thinking, but always ask for their perspective. Try to see if you can see it from their point of view. They're looking to see how you handle it. In this particular instance, rarely is it that you're actually right and they're actually wrong. It's more likely that they know they're wrong. They just want to see how you handle it. So do some collaborative problem solving, show that you've got conflict resolution skills, and always be respectful. All right. Sometimes the interviewer only wanted to listen to the same answers, which they have pictures in the mind. I'm having a hard time understanding this question. Could you please, if you put this question in, could you please clarify what you mean? Or maybe you could speak up if Corey can unmute you so I can understand what you mean. They only wanted to listen to the same answers. They have, I apologize that I'll tell you what I think this question means, and I apologize if I'm not getting it right. So I think what you mean by this is that an interviewer is asking a question and they have an answer that they want to hear, and you don't know what it is. So how do you answer that question? So if that's what you mean by this question, okay, so Okay, yes, I'll get to that next. Okay, so if that's what you mean by this question, I have to differentiate, are we talking about a technical question or a behavioral question? Because if we're talking about a technical question and they have a particular answer in mind, I don't know how to tell you to handle that because I am not in your field and I can't help you deal with the technical questions. However, I will tell you that like the last answer that I talked about, sometimes they're purposefully disagreeing with you to see how you handle it. They want to know, are you stuck in one way of doing things or are you willing to listen to another way to do things? So I would explain why what your answer is, and then ask them to tell you why they think that's a better answer. Listen, and then say, I can understand why you think that. Show them that you are willing to learn other ways of doing things. It is a huge thing that hiring managers tell me that they look for. Interviewers ask about planning for 5 or 10 years later. Well, I definitely can coach you on this, but I have to say, I think that this is less applicable to a gig. I don't know that in gigs, they really care if you're still going to be working for them in 5 or 10 years. Usually, if you're out there looking for long-term employment and the employer says, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Or where do you see yourself in the future? They want to know that you're going to stay because it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time, investment of time and money to onboard somebody into a company. So usually outside of the gig universe, if an employer says, what are your future plans? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? They want to know that you're going to stay. And I usually coach my clients to always see yourself there. However, in the gig universe, you're not going to still be working for them. Very few gigs that long. I don't think any that I saw are. So really, I think what they're asking about is, what is your motivation? Is this really what you love to do, or do you not have the passion? So this is getting to one of those deal breakers. Remember the deal breaker about, do you care or do you not care, or are you motivated? So I would answer that question, not specifically about, in 5 years, I want to be the, this position in this company. You don't have to be real specific, but you should articulate your passion for the field and how in 5 years or 10 years, you hope to be taking on bigger challenges in that field, doing the thing you love to do. Is it okay to answer all the questions? I also faced a situation where the interviewer was trying to prove that he is better than the candidate. Yeah. I hear a lot of stories about really bad interviewers, about interviewers who just talk about themselves the whole time. It can happen. Interviewers don't go to interviewer school to learn how to be good interviewers. I would say when it comes to that situation, I would do what I call yes-anding, right? Yes and, not no but yes and. Listen to what the interviewer has to say. And when they pause for a minute, if they're not even giving you a chance to get a word in, say yes. Validate whatever they've said. In other words, let them know what you're listening, restate what they've said, and then say and then add your piece, right? Then talk about something you've done that piggybacks on what they're talking about. If you can, pull out a success story. If you can, get an I statement about one of your strengths in there. I think that is all of our messages. All of our questions.
We have one more in the chat, Lily.
Oh, okay. What is it?
So nervous during interviews and can't express myself properly. What is your suggestion to recover this situation? Because it's the most common thing to happen to me most of the time.
I am so glad that this question got asked. Like I said at the very beginning, being nervous is okay. It's expected. They want you to be nervous because it says to them that you care. And I've actually spoken to a hiring manager who told me that the reason why he didn't hire one candidate is they were so relaxed and nonchalant, he thought they didn't really care. So just know that your nervousness is actually also excitement for the opportunity. So number one, I suggest that you reframe the nervousness as excitement. If you find that you have just lost your words, or I don't remember how you phrased it in the question, but you're just like stuck for a second because you're so nervous, stop, take a breath, look at the interviewer and say, and apologize, say, I'm sorry. I'm so excited for this opportunity. I seem to have like lost my train of thought or lost my words. May I take a moment? That's how you recover. You recover by reframing your nervousness as excitement. So you let them know that you care and you're excited for the opportunity. It's okay that you get nervous in interviews. It's okay that you're stumbling over your words or you need a minute. If you're prepared and you've practiced those store scenarios and those answers, it shouldn't take you long to be able to get yourself on track. If you're unprepared, then it's just painful, right? If you're unprepared, then you're constantly looking for the words and they're not understanding you and you're nervous and you're not going to find it. The best way to not be nervous is to be prepared. And the best way to handle nervousness in an interview is to reframe it as excitement.
Thank you, Lili.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being here with you guys today. Again, I really want to thank Kirabel and Safa for taking the time to work with me so that we could give you those examples. Corey, thank you so much for all that you've done to make today happen. And thanks to everyone who attended today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Lili. This recording will be available for you guys. We will do a Thrive for it. There are fantastic questions. If you have any other follow-up questions, we can get those answered. We do have 5 t-shirt winners. There will be a outcome survey that gets sent to you. If anybody would like just give us some feedback and let us know how you felt about the webinar and how useful these were. And there's plenty of other things that Lili can teach you guys and, you know, inspire you guys to be better at interviewing. So, you know, we'll welcome more with some great feedback. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Lili. We really appreciate your time and all of your effort in all of this.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. I would love to be able to see all the things in the chat.
Lots of thank yous. Outcome survey. Oh, outcome survey link isn't working. We can change that.
Yep. Do that right now.
Great webinar. Lots of great thanks you. Ton of information. It is a lot of information, and I hope nobody walks away feeling overwhelmed with what's, you know, kind of being thrown at you. It's a ton of information, but if you take it in and work and practice, then you're going to feel better going into an interview and expressing, you know, your passion for the things that you do.
Corey, the survey is accepting responses, so I don't know if there's maybe you want me to send the link again?
Sure. Can you put it in the chat?
Yes, let me do that right now. Here we go. All right.
Never thought interviewing had its own underlying science. Yeah, so the link is there for you guys to fill out for the survey. We'll give a minute just to let everybody take that, or just to grab the link from it.
Yeah, it's really, it's very useful information for me to know what you found useful and what I could do better if there's another webinar. So very good information. All right, well, on that note, everyone have a wonderful day. My email, I will put that in the chat as well. You can send any questions or, you know, anybody ever want to run over interviewing tips, tricks, I'm happy to sit with you and just kind of have you practice to a live person. Our goal here at Topcoder is really just to make sure that you are doing what you love and you have the
you have the tools to do that. So
I've been so impressed with everything that the Topcoder team does to support its members. It's really quite extraordinary.
it's a great group of people who are passionate about helping others do what they love. And that's a great part of being in this community.
Can anyone confirm that the outcome survey link is now working, that they were able to do it?
I
Yeah.
just clicked on
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Okay,
Perfect.
awesome.
Great.
All right, well, I'm going to end the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Or
Bye. Thank you,
day,
Lily.
great evening, great whatever time in the world it is right there.
Thank you.
Bye.